I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I don't think there's some smoking gun in the Epstein files. I don't think the Epstein files are some huge deal. I don't think that in the end, this whole thing is going to impact Trump much politically. But it is also clear that there is a reason that they don't want to release these files. You may have seen that many of the Martin Luther King files were suddenly released yesterday. I wonder why yesterday they were released. Now, remember that some of the most incendiary and potentially problematic for the King family files won't and can't be released until 2027 per a court order. And those are various FBI files, as the FBI was investigating, often harassing Martin Luther King back in the day. And they found stuff which is certainly not flattering to him. But the stuff that was released is largely innocuous. There's a reason you're not hearing anything about the details of what was in the Martin Luther King files that were released, because none of it is particularly newsworthy. What is newsworthy is the fact that the Trump administration is trying really, really hard to change the subject from Jeffrey Epstein. That was part of the effort. Now, I have said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I don't think there's some smoking gun in the Epstein files. I don't think the Epstein files are some huge deal. I don't think that in the end, this whole thing is going to impact Trump much politically. But it is also clear that there is a reason that they don't want to release these files. Oh, yeah, let's release JFK, release RFK, release MLK. It's true. It's not apples to apples. I get it. But the whole point is, they keep claiming they're all about transparency. Oh, we're just about transparency. We're about transparency. Except when it comes to the Epstein files. Well, in that case, we're going to respect a court order with regard to the grand jury material. Since when does this administration respect a court order? Suddenly it's, we'd like to see the grand jury material released. Come on, that's not what the MAGA folks want. They don't want the grand jury material. They want names. They want details. They want to know who else was doing stuff with Epstein. That's not what the grand jury is about. And a few moments ago, the president was asked about this, or at least was asked about the effort to get Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's girlfriend, who is now serving and then criminal partner after being his girlfriend, who is now serving decades in prison for her role in this. How now it seems the Assistant Attorney General, Todd Blanche, is going to be meeting with her lawyer to try and talk about her testifying in front of Congress. Now, that will be interesting, right? Are they going to offer her some sort of clemency if she does that? What would they be expecting her to say? I could see Todd Blanche asking, what do you know about Donald Trump? What would you say about Donald Trump? I think at this point, she'd probably do anything to get out of prison. So that's going to be an interesting element. In the context of that, President was asked this. He was at a press conference with the president of the Philippines. This is number 27, and here's how it went.
Yeah. Do you have any concern that your deputy attorney general is your former attorney would be conducting the interview, given?
No, I have no concern. He's a very talented person. He's very smart. I didn't know that they were going to do it. I don't really follow that too much. It's sort of a witch hunt, just a continuation of the witch hunt. The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that.
Now, I went through this yesterday. that is complete and utter nonsense. Okay. I mean, even if you accepted every word of what Tulsi Gabbard is saying, this happened after the election, after the 2016 election. But if you accept every word of what Tulsi Gabbard is saying, as I went through it in line by line detail on yesterday's show, there is no there. They are trying to claim that somehow the administration at the time was saying that the election was hacked and that infrastructure was actually and successfully hacked, except no one in the administration said that. What they said was that the Russians tried to influence the election, and we know that that's true. We know it. Even John Durham's report conceded that that was true. Even the Republican-led Senate investigation confirmed that the Russians were trying to influence the election in favor of Donald Trump. That's not in dispute. And Donald Trump is trying to put it in dispute again. But more importantly, what Tulsi Gabbard tried to do is play a bait and switch. They said that the election was rigged by the Russians by hacking into voting machines. No, they didn't say that. They didn't say that. They said they tried and they didn't succeed. That's what they said. So that supposed effort at a pivot isn't just a bad effort at a pivot. It's an effort at something that's entirely made up. With that said, I am curious how Hakeem Jeffries justifies now wanting the Epstein files out. Now, Democrats have not cared about the Epstein story, right? I mean, did you hear them yelling and screaming about this during the Biden administration? Did you hear them during the Biden administration saying, release the Epstein files, please? No, of course you didn't. Because now it's to their political advantage. So that's why they're talking about it now. I have been curious how Hakeem Jeffries is justifying this change, and apparently he addressed it. I haven't heard this yet. This is number 6.
And you have said that you support that movement. Why are Democrats just looking at this and pushing for this right now and not really during the Biden administration?
I support transparency in terms of the American people. The far right, Donald Trump, right-wing conspiracy theorists and others are the ones who have put this Jeffrey Epstein thing in the public domain. Let's be clear about that. No one looking at the facts disputes that. This isn't anything that any of us as House Democrats have been focused on ever in terms of trying to fan the flames of what may or may not happen. But once it has broken into the public domain, and there's a clear desire on behalf of the American people to get more information, then the right thing to do is to present the facts and the evidence to the American people so that they can make an informed decision about what may or may not have happened and who may or may not be implicated in the Jeffrey Epstein matter.
That's also BS. Let's be clear. Once it is broken into the public domain, that's the standard that he uses. At that point, now we need transparency. Yes, it's true. We didn't care about it before. With that said, it sure seems that the reason Trump doesn't want this out is because if you're going to start naming names of people that Epstein hung out with, Donald Trump will be one of them. There's no doubt about it. He was on Epstein's plane 7 or 8 times. He talked about him glowingly. And then he said he was never on the plane, which is odd. And then finally, before we switch topics, I want to play another piece of sound from Alan Dershowitz, who's the former Epstein attorney, because he, it sounds like, has seen, remember, he was involved in a lot of the civil lawsuits, putting aside being Epstein's lawyer. He was also accused, he said falsely, of having had a sexual dalliance with Virginia Giuffre, and she then dropped that case and almost had to issue a kind of apology to him. Sort of, I think it was something like, well, sometimes memories can be mistaken, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been very intimately involved in the case. And so, again, I'm interested in what he had to say this weekend about the grand jury records. This is number 13.
I think the judge should release it, but they're not in the grand jury transcripts. They're sealed records by 2 or 3 federal judges in the New York courts. I've seen some of these materials. For example, there is an FBI report of interviews with alleged victims in which at least one of the victims names very important people, and the names have been redacted. I know some of the names from my investigation. For example, George Mitchell, the former senator, Bill Richardson, the former ambassador to the UN, Ehud Barak, the granddaughter of Jacques Cousteau, were all accused. Now, whether any of these people actually did anything wrong, we don't know, because we know there have been many, many false accusations. For example, a woman named Sarah Ransom filed an affidavit, and it's probably in the record, and it's probably been sealed, in which she accused Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Richard Branson of having sex with young people, and she said she had videotapes of this. And then after an investigation, she admitted she made up the whole story, and yet the affidavit still remains in the court records.
All right. And of course, he doesn't include himself in the people who were accused there. But look, look, that's the problem, right? With releasing this sort of stuff is people can make allegations sometimes that are not true. And there's a reason why charges weren't brought in connection with some of those cases.